Okay, good morning, YouTubers. How you guys doing? It's a beautiful spring morning here in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, and you're hearing that god-awful sound behind me because I'm going to show you. You probably can't see through these trees because it's buttoned so beautifully here that there's a train behind me. So that's the sound you're hearing. It's hauling garbage. That's one of the tracks where they haul garbage in Beaver County. But anyways, so I get a lot of requests. Over the years, I've gotten so many questions about how did I make the transition from Pittsburgh homelessness to coming out of Pittsburgh and coming back to Beaver County. So I've decided to answer that question briefly. I may make another part to this, I may not, but I'm going to give you a very brief rundown of how that happened and what went down. And at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about the Roman Catholic Church and how they played a role in that. But that we're going to save that for the end of the video. So the deal was this. One particular evening, I came back to the shelter. Now, where I stayed in the north side, you had a curfew. So you could start coming back to the shelter at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but you had to be in by 7, unless you had a job. If you had a job, then, you know, you had special permission to where you could come back late at night if you were working until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and then, you know, of course, you could stay and get some sleep and get up and go back to work in the morning or whatever it is that you had to do. So this was on a Sunday evening. I came back about 5 o'clock. One of the directors of the shelter approached me and said, "Mark, I need to talk to you." I'm like, oh boy, what did I do? And he's like, "We have a project going on in this shelter and it involves work outside." He said, "Are you handy with a hammer and a saw?" I said, "Yeah, of course I am. I've done, brief, very basic construction and whatnot, He said, "I've picked 5 people," and he said, "You're one of them." Don't ask me why he picked me, because I do not know. I honestly, to this day, I do not know, because I never asked. He said, "I want you to go outside and we're going to have some renovation going on. I hired a couple of contractors and you're going to work with them. In exchange for your services, I'm going to give you a $50 Visa card and 4 bus passes." Now, in homeless talk, 4 bus passes. What that means is 2 round trips. 1 up, 1 back, 1 up, 1 back. You could get out of the city, okay? That was a great thing. You could get out of downtown Pittsburgh, go to the zoo, go to the Monroeville Mall, wherever you wanted to go. Waterfront Mall, whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds really great. He's like, good. He said, "You start tomorrow." Well, that was Monday. He said, now, in the mornings, you had to be out by 8:30. You had to be out of the shelter by 8:30 because another group of people would come in. If you stayed there at night, you could not stay there during the day. Well, I slept there at night, so that was my home. And then during the day, you got booted out and had to, go wherever and then come back at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You didn't have to come back at 4, but again, you had to be back by at least 7. So I helped create a whole new cage for our garbage cans and waste and stuff like that, and I got this $50 prepaid Visa card. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but I must tell you that when I got that, I'm like, oh geez, I can do whatever I want with this. I can go eat somewhere, I can maybe buy myself a pair of clothing, or something. Well, to make a very long story short, there was a person in that shelter that was really giving me a problem. He was an ex-con, he was a prisoner, and he still had this prison mentality. And we almost got into a physical altercation. And, when I got into the streets, without a criminal record, and I sure as hell wasn't gonna go out of the streets with a criminal record. So I decided to not engage with this individual. And I thought for my best self-interest was to leave. So after I completed my projects and I was awarded what I was claimed to get compensated for, which I did, I decided to return to Beaver County with $50 in my pocket as a gift card and 4 bus passes. So the bus passes got me back to Beaver County. When I got back to Beaver County, I was scared. I got back into Ambridge. And after a year of being and living on the streets and staying out in the streets, Ambridge looked like another planet to me. I didn't even recognize Beaver County. I did not feel that I should be here. I did not feel that I should be a part of this place. And at the same time, there was a conflict of interest because I didn't want to go back to Pittsburgh. But I already had a job lined up. I knew that I was going to start work in a couple of days. I left on a Monday evening, and I was going to start this job in Beaver County the following Thursday morning, and I did. For 3 weeks, I think it was, I didn't eat for almost 3 weeks. I lost like 20 pounds. I didn't have no money. And the place that I worked at, I did not have anybody that I knew that I could ask for money. I swallowed my pride, and I starved, and I went hungry. I had a bank account the entire time I was in Pittsburgh, but of course I didn't use it because I didn't have any money. Just before I left to come back to Beaver County, I went online in the library and I looked at that bank account to see what kind of money I had in there. I knew I had a little bit of money, but I knew it wasn't enough to, you know, be self-sufficient or anything like that. And I punched in my numbers and my password, and I had $1 in there. I had $1. And I'm like, oh, well, that's good, because, and it was, because that means it was still an active account. So when I signed up for this job, I, you know, got the direct deposit set up into that account. And again, almost 3 weeks went by before I finally got a full paycheck. And one Friday morning, I woke up sleeping in a field in Beaver County, and I went to the Beaver Valley Mall, famished. I did have a bus pass because I used that $50 to buy a weekly bus pass so that I could get around. So I didn't have to do that much walking, which was a good thing because I was very weak and I was very famished. And I went to the Beaver Valley Mall and I checked my balance. I just wanted to see what I had in there because I knew what day I was supposed to get paid, but I didn't know, you know, the timings with, you know, how direct deposit works, so I didn't know. And when I made an inquiry of my balance, I had almost $800 in there. Guys, I cried like a baby right there at the Mac machine. $800 is not a lot of money, but when you've been homeless for over a year out in the streets, you haven't had any money, I looked at this with such an overwhelming sense of freedom and independence that I said to myself, do you mean I can actually go somewhere and eat wherever I want? Guys, that was such an overwhelming feeling, you have no idea. When you're homeless, the world is a very different place. I was forced into a set of circumstances where I had to adapt. Morgan Freeman made the best line about it in the Shawshank Redemption, where he says, get busy living or get busy dying. I got busy living. I wanted to make that determination. I had had it. I had been on those streets for a year. I had this asshole that was, you know, harassing me in the shelter, and I said, you know what, this is it. I'm done. I got to get out of here. I got to make a stand in my life. I didn't create these circumstances, but my attitude about these circumstances is what determined me to get out. To make a long story short, a couple of weeks later, I met a wonderful woman, and I explained to her my situation, and she accepted me for who I was and for the circumstances in which she found me. 5 years later, we're still together, and we're going to get married. So to set the record straight, I appreciate everybody's concerns and everybody who ever helped me, but I am no longer homeless. I have not been homeless for almost 5 years, in fact, over 5 years. And I am in a very happy place right now in my life. So what I want everybody to realize, especially people who are watching this right now, who are facing adversity, who are facing poverty, who are in poverty, who suffers from addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, pornography, eating, whatever life throws at you, sometimes you don't have control over that circumstance. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Homelessness is a very diverse thing, ladies and gentlemen. There are people out in those streets who have college degrees. There are people out in those streets who are plumbers, electricians, but they have problems. You know, one of the things that was really shocking to me was to attempt to make an adjustment to see just how diverse homelessness is. There's a lot of beautiful women out there who are homeless. I met a lot of them in Pittsburgh that lived out in the streets with me, that would sell their bodies because they were severe drug addicts, alcoholics, degenerates, rejections from their own families. The list is endless, guys. I can't get into it. And I finally made the decision. I said, look, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to beat this. I had a plan in action, and I had support. If you find yourself in this circumstance, don't be afraid to ask for help. Because one of the things that I realized was the longer I stayed out there, I met people, I met the right people, I was around the right people. The streets have a code of honor. You keep your mouth shut and you respect the rules of the streets. Because if you don't, you can end up in a box somewhere or under a bridge, never to be heard from again. Something I learned, something I had to adapt to quite quickly. And I overcame all that. I had a lot of help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Especially you right now watching this video and you find yourself in that circumstance. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of help out there. Take advantage of it because right now you need it. Okay? And it's nothing to be ashamed about. If homelessness taught me anything, it taught me how strong I really am when I need to be. It's not a matter of boasting. It's just